Wikipedia used to accept it. They stopped. There's an airline that used to accept it. They stopped. More large companies have stopped accepting Bitcoin than have started. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, even people that...
the timeline was for the ones that stopped?
I think they might have tried it out for a year and then gave up on it, more or less.
I think most of them stopped around the time the network started to become congested and people started having a bad user experience because you didn't know when their transactions were going to be confirmed.
Well, I know for a fact Wikipedia stopped because they A/B tested it and got less donations because of confusion.
That's
which is reasonable. And they restrict a lot of the other payment methods they could accept as one of the largest websites on the internet, for that reason. So Bitcoin has a lot of problems. It has bad user interface. It has no retail marketing. It has insanely...
Sorry, I would disagree on the no retail marketing front. So in 2012, I set up BitcoinStore.com, which was the first website in the world to start offering items, consumer electronics items for sale for Bitcoin. We had around 500,000 items for sale, most of which that were about the same price or even less than Amazon.com. And in our first year, we sold more than $4 million worth of merchandise. And that was back in 2012. And the ecosystem is much, much, much bigger than that now. So I think there is a lot of commerce that goes on with Bitcoin, and it might not just be right there in front of everybody's face, especially if they're not using it. But I would disagree with the point that there's not much commerce going on.
Well, my point wasn't that there wasn't commerce. It's that there wasn't marketing. So we have a tragedy of commons problem. You may have advertised for your retail website, but you weren't promoting general Bitcoin ads. These pump and dump ICOs that have margin.
Again, so I paid for national radio ads on more than 150 radio stations across the United States for like 6 years straight, promoting Bitcoin in general. And almost all of those ads were actually promoting Bitcoin.org. And so there was a huge amount of that. And I wasn't the only one doing things like that. There was a lot of action like that. But
well, I mean, either would you like to see would you like there to be more marketing?
I'd like there to be more marketing for a product that's actually useful for people. And at the moment, I'm worried about the utility of Bitcoin. I think is
well, we can skip past Bitcoin's problems if you want, and shift to the fork stuff if you want.
I don't want this to turn into a 6-hour long podcast, but
I'll give you a list of the things I have here, and then you pick which ones you want to play with.
Okay.
So here's what we've got. I think that most people don't use Bitcoin for the currency case as opposed to the store value case because you'd break your neck to try and find someone that would accept it. It's very, very hard to spend, and it's very, very hard to buy. So it's much better just to sit on it and watch it shoot to the moon and get rich sitting than it is to effectively pay 8 times more for anything you ever used because now you don't have those coins, you spent them. Like anytime you use Bitcoin and you don't replace them, you feel really bad when you realize you spent 8 times what you needed to because you didn't replace them.
So that's a good argument to replace the Bitcoins you're spending every time you spend them.
It is, but people are lazy and sometimes they're afraid to buy in at 4 and 8x higher numbers because people, think there'll be a reversion to the mean. So yes, people spend your Bitcoin, ask people to accept them, replace them if you do spend them. So here's my list. I think the reason Bitcoin price dropped it didn't drop on its own. It dropped in relation to other things that appeal to other people. Bitcoin has always appealed to libertarians and free thinkers. And another meme came out with the Kumbaya world computer social justice warrior thing. And they're different vertical markets. And Bitcoin was known to these people and wasn't appealing to them, but world computer was. And now that world computer meme that the social justice warrior types love is promoting pump and dump ICO crap and is the network which all the pump and dump garbage is being released on. The reason that this space is considered frothy and overvaluated is because of those pump and dump ICOs that are running on an ecosystem which is not Bitcoin. And having lower fees in Bitcoin would not have affected that market cap ratio whatsoever. So the reason that we have...
jump in there?
Yeah.
So it's worth pointing out that Vitalik, the creator of Ethereum, wanted to build it on top of Bitcoin and would have built it on top of Bitcoin if not for the current core dev team telling him, get the heck out of here. You're not going to build it. We're not going to increase the block size. We're not going to make room for this sort of thing to be built on top of Bitcoin. And if that had been allowed to be built on top of Bitcoin, all of that economic activity that we see happening on Ethereum would have been happening on Bitcoin instead. And that's a direct result of Bitcoin not being allowed to scale to keep up with consumer demand.
Now, this is the first part in the argument where we're going to have to get actually technical. You guys are going to have to be a little bit technical for this part. Roger just stated that it was an economic loss for Bitcoin that Ethereum didn't launch on it and tie its liquidity into it. And he is probably correct on that point. However, there's a technical point which makes his liquidity point not useful. And that is the Ethereum network is down often because they use a blockchain, and the blockchain fills up just like ours. And it fills up faster because they have larger blocks. And so there's literally a competition to shove your transaction into the new ICO as a miner before you let actual normal retail people in so that you can get the coins before they run out. So there's already front running going on in Ethereum mining. There's already full blocks going on in Ethereum mining. And there's already millions upon millions of dollars being lost to gigantic attack surface in Ethereum. And I am glad that the poison and problems and bad design decisions that Vitalik and his crew made, which are unrepairable, I might add, multiple consensus implementations from different software languages from different teams are very much more likely to fall out of consensus than a single software implementation. It's very hard to write one thing that doesn't have bugs. It's exponentially harder to write two and more things that don't have bugs.
So if I can jump in a little bit there, if that's all right. So
yeah, always.
There were, I guess, 2 points there. So you were complaining about the miners in Ethereum colluding to get their transactions in ahead of other people so that they can do whatever. That exact same thing is happening on Bitcoin right now because the blocks are full. Mining pools and wallets like BTC China actively say, okay, people that are transacting with our wallet, will include your transactions first in our blocks that we mine with our pool. So that exact same thing is happening on the Bitcoin network right now, where people are front running other people's Bitcoin transactions. You can now pay with credit cards to have your transactions included with a block because it would be too expensive to pay with the fees with the Bitcoin if the initial fee wasn't high enough. In regards to the multiple yeah, it definitely sucks. In regards to the multiple implementations on Bitcoin, on Ethereum, as compared to one monolithic implementation on Bitcoin, maybe not. But if you have one bug with the monolithic implementation of Bitcoin, then the entire network comes crashing down. If you have one bug with one of four implementations on Ethereum, then a fourth of the network comes crashing down or forks off.
But that's worse. I guess that's worse. Having
is a fourth of it forking off or come crashing down worse than 100% of it?
Yeah, it's like writing a book and then you make an edit and then you don't remember what you edited and you have to search through the whole book to see what got screwed up. But if when you write to the, if you can't write to the book anymore and you have to wait and there's only one copy of the book, it's basically versioning, right? Like the reason that you don't write software with just Word documents is because you have to keep track of changes. And that's all a blockchain is. It's something that keeps track of changes. So if you had a fork, like what you've described, technically a consensus failure is a fork. This thing doesn't say the same as that thing. And now an arbiter, a trusted third party, a powerful God has to decide which one is right and which one is wrong. So
I agreed up until everything at the point where you said a powerful arbitrator or God has to decide. I think the network and the users get to decide. And we saw that with Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. There was a fork and one set of users went one way and another set went another. And there wasn't some, God from on high that forced everybody to go in one direction. It was just
these forks happen all the time. They're called orphans. An orphan is the network deciding that what you thought was going to happen isn't going to happen. And it just goes away. It's a dead end. So when you mine a block and you have the longest block, and everyone agrees that's the longest block, but someone else had a good proof of work at the same time, but they got there a little bit later, their accurate, useful transactions that they decided on and fees they accepted, it goes and dies. So every single day in the Bitcoin network, every orphaned block is a version of the blockchain that never got to be agreed upon because it was decided on by the god of timing and the network consensus rules. What you've described is a larger version of that. Go ahead.
I said, I don't think we disagree. I think we're on the same page here.
So my point is that there is always something deciding that someone's idea of the future is not going to happen. Usually it's the consensus network. But if the consensus network fails, Then you fall over to social consensus, which is what you described in the ETH Classic example. And can we both agree that you shouldn't roll back the chain? Isn't that the whole idea here?